Something massive is already happening, and almost nobody is paying attention. China has deployed robot police, robot workers, and fully operational humanoid machines across real cities and factories right now. America is pushing harder than it ever has just to keep pace. Japan, Germany, and Norway are racing alongside them, all fighting to claim their own piece of what comes next. This is a live global war for the most powerful technology humanity has ever built. And what the United States is secretly building to win it will completely change everything you thought you understood about who controls this world. China isn't prototyping anymore, it's shipping. Right now, in a country most people write off as years behind, a machine is walking down a public street next to a real police officer. This is Shenzhen, and the robot isn't a prop or a prototype hidden in a lab. It's on active patrol beside SWAT officers, right now, in public. So, what is it actually doing out there? At major intersections across China, robots like this one are pulling real law enforcement duty. They scan the street with high-definition cameras, catch scooters running stop lines, catch riders without helmets, and the second they spot a violation, they call it out with a live audio warning. On the spot, no human needed to press a button first. If someone ignores 3 warnings in a row, the robot logs it and sends the report straight to a police command center. It talks, it watches, it reports people to the police, all on its own. While other countries debated whether humanoid robots belonged in factories or on sidewalks, China simply built the machines and put them to work. Quietly, it became the country that now controls 80% of the entire global humanoid robot market. For every 10 robots being built anywhere on the planet, 8 of them trace straight back to Chinese factories. None of this happened by accident, and that is what makes it so unsettling. This was not a company chasing a bold idea. It was a government that put a number on paper and ordered the future into existence. The target is 100,000 humanoid robots deployed by 2027, treated the same way a country once treated steel or oil, as a matter of national survival rather than simple business growth. Behind that headline number sits an even bigger one most people never hear about. In a single year, China installed 276,000 industrial robots. Japan, the next closest country on Earth, installed only 46,000. That gap is so wide it stops being a race and becomes a completely different sport, one that only China is currently playing. Then, to remove any last doubt about how serious this has become, China did something almost no government would dare attempt with unfinished technology. It put humanoid robots on the single most watched broadcast on the planet, the Spring Festival Gala, watched by hundreds of millions of people in one night. A row of robots walked out under the lights and performed a perfectly synchronized dance in front of that entire audience. In one broadcast, experimental machinery became a national symbol, beamed directly into hundreds of millions of living rooms at once. This is not theater hiding an empty promise. These machines are already doing real work that would frighten most factory owners. The Walker S, 2 humanoid, proves it by doing something that sounds almost impossible. Every 90 minutes, without a single human touching it, the robot stops mid-shift, pulls out its own dead battery, plugs in a fresh one, and keeps working straight through the night, as if it never stopped at all. But the moment this stops being a factory story is the moment you meet the PM-01. This robot does not stay hidden behind walls. It walks the open streets of Shenzhen directly beside human police officers, shaking hands with strangers and waving at children on the sidewalk. The plan right now is to put machines exactly like this one into most major Chinese cities within the next year. The future most people still imagine as decades away is actually a matter of months. Investors have already done the math on where this is heading, and the number they landed on should stop anyone in their tracks. Morgan Stanley believes the humanoid robot industry could eventually be worth $5 trillion. That figure stops treating this as a gadget trend. It starts treating it as a new industry built on the scale of smartphones or the internet itself, with China positioned to swallow the largest single share before most other countries finish their first prototype. That gap between real progress and empty promises is exactly where the danger starts to show. Not every country chasing this future is actually building it. Japan unveiled a rideable robotic horse called Koryo that looked thrilling in every photo released to the press. Then came the truth hiding behind the marketing. No working version has ever been shown to the public, and the company itself admits it might not be ready until the year 2050. That gap separates a country actually shipping machines into the real world from one still sketching the future on a whiteboard. But do not mistake China's speed for control. The cracks in this technology are not hidden in some lab. They are already caught on camera for the entire world to see. In May of last year, a robot called the Unitree H1 was hanging from a crane during a routine factory test when it suddenly lost all control. Its arms and legs flailed violently, knocking equipment across the room, and 2 engineers ran for their lives to escape it. This was not even the first warning. Months earlier, a robot from the same company had already lunged straight toward a crowd standing behind a festival barricade. Then, only months ago, something happened that was far harder to explain away as a simple glitch. A robot performing a rehearsed dance routine in front of a live university crowd suddenly broke from its script mid-performance. It wrapped its arms around a female student standing on stage, and staff had to physically step in and pull the machine away while the crowd watched in stunned silence. The company blamed nearby drone interference, but the question it left behind refused to disappear. If a machine can break its own programming during something as harmless as a dance, no one can honestly promise what it will do the next time it stands beside a human in a moment that actually matters. China did not just build the scale and speed of this revolution. It built the entire thing on direct government orders, not on any accident of chance. Engineering a future most countries are still debating into something that already walks, works, and occasionally malfunctions in front of a live audience. But while the rest of the world was still reacting to everything China had done, another country was working quietly in the background. What it had actually been building would turn out to be something almost nobody saw coming. Subtopic 2. America's answer is better than anyone expected. For years, people laughed at the idea that America could catch up. Now the laughing has stopped because the numbers coming out of the United States are not just competitive with China's. In some places, they are better. America had already built the answer, and it had been sitting there the whole time unnoticed, while the world stared at China. Waymo cars have now driven more than 170 million miles with nobody behind the wheel. No test track. No safety driver waiting to grab control. Real streets, real traffic, real strangers stepping off curbs without looking. And the numbers coming back from that experiment should stop anyone mid-sentence, because independently reviewed data shows these driverless cars cause somewhere between 80 and over 90% fewer serious crashes than human drivers. Read that again. A machine with no eyes, no instincts, no gut feeling is proving safer on the road than we are. That alone would be a strong comeback story. But it gets stranger because the most impressive part of America's answer was not on a road at all. It was standing on a factory floor in South Carolina inside a BMW plant, working 10-hour shifts every single day for 5 straight months. That machine was Figure 02, a humanoid robot with hands sensitive enough to feel something as light as 3 grams, roughly the weight of a coin. It did not call in sick. It did not slow down in week 3. It simply kept working, day after day, until 5 months had passed, and nobody at that plant could remember what the line looked like before it arrived. And a few miles away, inside one of Hyundai's own factories, something even stranger was quietly happening. Boston Dynamics had rebuilt its famous Atlas robot from the ground up, swapping out its old hydraulic joints for fully electric ones, and the new version could bend and twist in ways no human body ever could. No remote control, no operator sitting somewhere with a joystick. Atlas was moving on its own, picking up parts, carrying them across the floor, making its own small decisions about how to get the job done. For a moment, it genuinely looked like America had not just caught up to China. It looked like America might actually be ahead. Then there is Tesla, chasing something even bigger than a factory worker. Elon Musk is not trying to build a few thousand clever machines for a handful of car plants. He is trying to build an entire new category of product, and he is doing it at a price built for mass adoption, somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 per unit, with production numbers meant to climb from a few thousand robots toward 100,000 within a single year. Think about what that number actually means. Tesla is not talking about robots as a luxury experiment anymore. It is talking about robots the way it once talked about electric cars, as something ordinary people will eventually just own. But here is where the excitement should start to feel a little uncomfortable, because nobody has stopped to ask the one question that usually comes first with anything this powerful. Who is checking that it's safe? Right now, in the United States, there is no federal safety requirement a humanoid robot has to pass before it can work beside a human being. None. No independent agency has publicly tested Optimus and confirmed it is safe to stand next to. The only testing on record is the testing Tesla runs on itself, behind its own closed doors, using its own standards, with nobody outside the company checking the results. That gap between speed and safety is not just a theory. It already has a name attached to it, and a lawsuit. In November of last year, Figure AI's own former head of product safety filed a legal complaint after he says he was fired, just days after warning the company's top executives directly. His warning was simple and terrifying. The company's robot was powerful enough to fracture a human skull. He pointed to an actual incident as proof, a moment when one of the robots malfunctioned and tore a gash straight into a steel refrigerator door. The kind of damage that should never come from something built to work next to people. Figure has denied all of it, calling the claims false and insisting the engineer was let go for poor performance. The court has not ruled either way. But the warning is now permanently on record, filed under oath, sitting in a courthouse, waiting. So here is where America's comeback story actually stands. It has built machines that drive safer than we do. It has built a robot that never quits, working alongside human beings for months at a time. It has built a robot that moves in ways no person ever could, entirely on its own. And it is racing to put all of it into ordinary homes and ordinary workplaces at a price nearly anyone can afford. Faster than any government agency has managed to write a single rule to test whether that's actually safe. But there is one detail sitting underneath all of this that nobody in Silicon Valley wants said out loud during a product launch. Every one of these machines, the ones built in American factories, funded by American billionaires, marketed as proof that America is winning this race, depends on parts it cannot make itself. Somewhere inside Optimus, inside Figure, inside the very same Atlas walking freely through a Hyundai plant, there are components that come from only one place on Earth, and the country that controls them is the exact same country America is supposedly racing to beat. Subtopic 3. The twist has a twist. America's robots run on China. Open up one of these American-made robots, the ones just celebrated as proof that the United States is finally catching up, and the pride starts to crack almost immediately. Because inside, hidden under the metal and the marketing, are parts that America cannot make on its own. A Wall Street Journal investigation laid it out in plain terms. America leads the world in the brains of these machines, the chips, and the software that let a robot think and react. But the body, the actual physical parts that let it move, belongs to someone else entirely. China controls the motors. China controls the gears. China controls the magnets that let every joint bend exactly where it needs to. Even a robot stamped "Assembled in America" often cannot take a single step without a part that came from a Chinese factory first. This is not the first time this exact pattern has played out. It happened before, with drones. A Chinese company silently took over most of the American drone market year after year, until it controlled the skies before anyone in Washington fully noticed. Then came the ban. And when American companies scrambled to fill the gap left behind, they discovered something uncomfortable. They simply could not build fast enough or cheap enough to replace what they had lost. That same story is now playing out again, except this time it is not drones in the sky. It is robots standing on factory floors and soon, inside homes. And China is not shy about using this power. In October of last year, Beijing introduced a rule that changed everything. Now, if a product made anywhere in the world contains even a trace amount of Chinese rare earth material, that product needs Chinese government approval before it can be exported. Starting in December, any company tied to a foreign military, including the United States, is almost never granted that approval. Read that carefully. China is not just selling parts anymore. It is deciding, one license at a time, which countries are even allowed to build with them. This already happened once, and it already hurt. Back in April of last year, the first wave of these restrictions hit, and almost overnight, American and European car makers could not get enough magnets to keep their production lines running. Factories slowed down. Some shut their doors entirely, for days at a time, simply because a part smaller than a coin was suddenly impossible to buy. Even after some supply came back, the price never fully recovered. Buyers outside China were paying 6 times more for the exact same material Chinese factories were getting for a fraction of the cost. So, what exactly are we talking about here? Not some rare, exotic material buried deep in a mine somewhere. Every single humanoid robot needs about 2 pounds of a very specific magnet, made from neodymium and praseodymium. And demand for this magnet is expected to jump by 167% by the year 2050. That is not a shortage waiting to happen someday. That is a shortage already being built into the very foundation of an industry everyone is racing to dominate. And here's the part that makes this so much worse than it first appears. China does not just mine these materials. China barely needs to. China mines somewhere between 60 and 70% of the world's rare earths, but it controls a staggering 91% of the refining process, and 94% of the finished magnets that actually come out the other end. Even if another country dug up its own rare earth ore tomorrow, that raw material is almost worthless without China's refineries to turn it into something usable. The mine was never the real choke point. The factory was. Now sit with this final fact, because it changes the entire meaning of everything you have just heard. The exact same magnet, built from the exact same materials, does not stay in one lane. It sits inside a Tesla humanoid robot folding laundry in someone's living room. And it sits inside the actuators of an F-35 fighter jet. And it sits inside a Virginia-class submarine, silently patrolling somewhere deep underwater. One magnet. 3 completely different machines. One of them makes your coffee. Another one can end a war, which means every time China grants or denies an export license, it is not just deciding whether a factory robot gets built on schedule. It is silently touching the supply chain behind some of the most advanced military hardware the United States owns. The line between a consumer product and a weapon was never as far apart as everyone assumed. It runs through the exact same magnet, made in the exact same place, controlled by the exact same government. And once you understand that, a much darker question starts to take shape. If the hardware moves this freely between a factory floor and a fighter jet, how far away is the moment when the robot itself stops being the product and starts being the weapon? Subtopic 4. The line, nobody wants to talk about, worker or weapon. That question does not stay hypothetical for long because the robot has already crossed that line, and it did not happen quietly in some classified lab. It happened on camera, in daylight, with soldiers standing right next to it. Start with a machine built right here in America. It is called the Phantom Mk1. It costs $150,000, and it does not pretend to be harmless. It comes with mounts built specifically to carry weapons, and it already has real contracts with the Pentagon behind it. This is not a hidden military project buried in a defense budget somewhere. This is a company selling a humanoid robot built from the ground up to carry a gun. Lawmakers know exactly how fast this is moving, and it is scaring them. In just the first few months of this year, 4 separate bills landed in Congress, one after another. The Humanoid Robot Act, the American Security Robotics Act, the National Commission on Robotics Act, and the GUARD Act. 4 bills from different lawmakers, all racing to answer the same terrifying question at the same time. How do you regulate a machine that is already walking around before anyone agreed on the rules? But while politicians were still writing bills, the war in Ukraine had already stopped waiting. Ukrainian ground robots have carried out more than 22,000 combat missions in just 3 months. 22,000. And it is only getting bigger because Ukraine's own defense ministry announced plans to field 25,000 new unmanned ground vehicles in the first half of this year alone. In one case, a single robot held a frontline position completely alone, with no human backup for 45 straight days. 45 days. No soldier could do that. A machine did. Then, in April, something happened that should stop every person reading this in their tracks. Ukrainian forces captured a fortified Russian position using only robots and drones. Not one single human soldier stepped onto that ground during the attack. The machines took it. The humans simply walked in afterward to hold what the robots had already won. And to be completely fair, there is one line that has not been crossed yet, and it matters enough to say clearly. Right now, a human being still makes the final decision to fire on every single one of these armed Ukrainian robots. That is not a limitation of the technology. That is a choice made on purpose by people who understand exactly how close they are standing to a line they do not want to cross. It is the last piece of human control left standing in a war that machines are already fighting almost everywhere else. The world's own experts saw this coming before it happened. Back in March of last year, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the very organization that writes the rules of war, issued a formal warning. Without binding international limits, they said, autonomous weapons risk crossing a line that the laws of war were never built to handle. That warning came more than a year before Ukraine's robots captured that position with no human inside the fight. The experts were not guessing, they were right on time. And while all of this was unfolding, the United States government made its own move, one that connects every single piece of this story back to where it started. On June 8th of this year, the Pentagon formally added Unitree, Alibaba, Baidu, and BYD to its official list of companies it says are tied to the Chinese military, bringing the total number of companies on that list to 188. Starting June 30th, the Pentagon is banned from signing new contracts with any of them. Every one of these companies has pushed back hard. Baidu called the accusation entirely baseless. Alibaba says it is not a Chinese military company and never has been. But whatever the outcome of that argument, the fact itself is impossible to ignore. The United States government just formally flagged the same company whose robots are sold to universities, police departments, and even the US Army as a military threat. And that threat is not some vague suspicion built on politics. It is filmed, named, and dated. During a joint military exercise between China and Cambodia called Golden Dragon back in 2024, Chinese state television broadcast footage of Unitree robots, the exact same company just named by the Pentagon, training alongside real human soldiers. One of those robots had a rifle mounted directly onto its back. In the footage, a soldier calls the robot a new member of the unit, standing shoulder to shoulder with the men beside it. This is the same robot line sold online, right now, for a few $1,000s, to hobbyists, to universities, to anyone with a credit card. So here is where this actually leaves us. The same category of machine currently being sold as a helpful assistant, the one folding your laundry, restocking your groceries, or dancing on a stage for applause, is, at this very moment, already standing on a battlefield somewhere in the world, already carrying a weapon, and already being trained to fight alongside human soldiers. Nobody voted on this. No single moment marked the exact second a factory tool became a soldier. It simply happened, one deployment at a time, one contract at a time, one quiet decision at a time, until the line between a worker and a weapon disappeared completely, and almost no government on Earth has fully caught up to what that actually means.